بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه مباركا عليه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى جل جلاله وعم نواله والصلاة والسلام على سيد الحبيب المصطفى صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن صدق الله العظيم. My dear respected sisters, we've had a discussion about Ramadan and what to do in Ramadan and other things related, so I'm not going to take too much time. I want to spend some time today if you have questions to deal with them. But since Ramadan is coming very close, just a few weeks away, there may be just some things that I will mention which may have not been mentioned. So the few things that I want to mention about Ramadan, some of you may have heard them before because we discuss these things generally before Ramadan as well, and it's as a reminder. So the main thing is that we want the best out of this month of Ramadan, and our aim and objective right from the outset needs to be that this Ramadan has to be better than the previous Ramadan, and in fact any Ramadan before it. Because it's the opportunity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us every year to have that potential just to do more and to get more for what we do, to basically get more for less. We want to use it as much as possible to try to accumulate, because it could be our last Ramadan. I mean, that's a possibility as well. We may not get other Ramadan. So the idea of the Ramadan is actually to boost us, to rocket us to another level. So we want that to be better than any of the Ramadans before it. But in order to do that, then you need to prepare. To get the best out of something, the best thing is to prepare for it. And the way you prepare is to try to get major chores out of the way beforehand. Everybody has things that they want to do. Ramadan is still part of our life. We still have to eat in Ramadan. We just changed the schedule. We still have to live. People are still going to have to go to school. People will still have to go to work. There'll still be repair works maybe. There'll still be shopping to do, and so on and so forth. But the more we can try to get out of the way beforehand, then the more we can dedicate ourselves to the activities of Ramadan itself as opposed to the mundane activities. I mean, I don't think it's possible to actually just cook everything beforehand and just eat. I mean, you still have to warm up things and so on. But if we can get most of the base preparation done, maybe get also a schedule made for Ramadan for every single day what you're going to cook. Because I know for some women, one of the most difficult things, even more than cooking itself, is to actually decide what to cook. That's a major psychological decision that has to be taken, because they're thinking, what would I like? What would the people I'm feeding and that are also going to eat with me, what do they like? And have I had it before? Have we just made it before? It shouldn't seem like a repeat. And it should please people as well. So if you can just brainstorm that beforehand and make a schedule, then it's easy. Then also, there's certain shopping that needs to be done for these things. Well, that can also be taken care of beforehand. I need this much meat, I need this much of this much of that. Most of that can also be done in advance. So again, all of that can be prepared, all of that can be organized from beforehand, and that should help a lot. Because in Ramadan, you don't want to be kind of rushing around trying to do different things. It just takes away real time. It just takes away a lot of benefit that you could potentially get during the month of Ramadan. Right, so number one, the mundane things, we plan for that and we try to prepare for that and get a lot of that preparation done. Number two, the second thing is that for our success in Ramadan, what do we want to do extra this year? If last year I finished this many Qurans and I did this much reading and this much reflection and this much dhikr, then I want to try to get more of that done this month of Ramadan. I want to include our family in it, for example. I want everybody to do something. I want, how can we facilitate that? What kind of plans can we make? What kind of strategies do we have in that regard? So I think when we try to plan like that okay, we're going to try to have maybe a competition of who reads the most, not just who reads the most Quran, but who reads the most tafsir, who reflects, who takes time to do that. Maybe some other activities of maybe helping somebody else who don't have, maybe to give them some iftar, to help some iftar, maybe contribute one day to the masjid iftar, for example, if that's happening. Because feeding people in Ramadan is also a good thing to help somebody break the fast. But then if that's what you're mainly focused on, to the detriment of reading the Quran and so on, because you're cooking whole day for every day, I mean, that's not really a balance either. What we heard from some of our mashayikh of the past, even Sheikh Zakaria rahmatullahi, they used to have the women of the house just cook some of the basic dishes, but they used to order the roti and the bread and all the rest of it. So that was just to facilitate for them. But then what about those people, or those sisters who are actually doing the roti business? They're not going to get any worship done. So we need to be considerate of those as well. So I'm not promoting that you go and start buying your roti from these roti producing sisters, because they have to do some ibadat as well. So maybe they can just make a huge stock beforehand or something like that, right? But anyway, that's just certain things. The main thing I would say is that in terms of Ramadan, what we should add is obviously our Quran reading, because every letter has the additional 10 rewards for it. But along with that, the Ramadan month needs to be also the month of tahajjud. So whichever timetable you're following, obviously if you're following the earlier timetable, there's going to be very less time for tahajjud. But then since most of the women will be praying at home, they're not going to have to go to the masjid, so they're not actually restricted to the time it takes in the masjid to finish the Quran. To be honest, if you have children or family members who have Quran, who have memorized the Quran, rather than let them just do 4 rakats somewhere in a masjid, Taraweeh, I would actually personally suggest that you get them to do Taraweeh at home, as long as you got somebody to listen to them. If you've got 2 hafiz in the home, or you can organize with another relative or something, another cousin or something like that, so that the women can even do Taraweeh at home. That's really good. That's what we actually do. We've been doing for the last several years anyway. So it's very useful, because the women at home also get to attend the Taraweeh in the house with their family members. So that's one thing that you can do. Along with that, try to at least do some tahajjud prayer each day, even if that's just 2 or 4 rakats. I know that for the people who are following the early timetable, there's actually not much time in between at all, because if I'm assuming Sehri time is going to be around 1 something or 1 o'clock or something like that. I'm assuming it's going to be 1 something. By the time you finish Taraweeh about 12 o'clock, you've got about 1 hour to do everything. So again, if all of that is prepared from beforehand, then you can actually spend that time. And the most wonderful thing is that if you can actually try to keep your wudu from Isha to Fajr, that would be wonderful, because then you've got actually the whole night spent in wudu. To be able to do Fajr with the same wudu that you did for Isha and Taraweeh, that's something that we just used to hear in books, that we used to just read in books and hear about the people of the past, that they did this. But Allah's made that a reality for us. It's easy. And if you can actually do it from Maghrib time, then that's even better, right? Because the longer you stay in wudu. So all of these are particular benefits. So you do tahajjud prayer. And then of course there's the fast. The fast is very long. The main thing in the fast is not to waste any time, but rather to try to use it to the best of your ability. And when you have nothing else to do, then don't waste your time with watching TV or internet. Or I mean, nowadays people will probably put their TVs off. If they've got one in the house, they'll probably put them off in Ramadan. A lot of people do that. But then there's one TV that you're never going to have off, which is WhatsApp videos that people send to us, and Facebook videos and so on. So they need to be minimized as well. In fact, if you can just get yourself off groups during the month of Ramadan, that would be the best thing. Only keep yourself on the most essential ones that you need to be on. And even those that you're on, I mean, you just have to try to learn to ignore. Maybe this is the time to liberate yourself and ignore as much as possible. The Prophet ﷺ said that whoever fasts during the month of Ramadan with iman and ihtisab, their previous sins will be forgiven. And that means whoever fasts for the sake of Allah, because of their faith in Allah, not because it's just what every believer does and if I don't do it I'm going to look really bad, but really because I want to do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That will actually make the fast much easier. Because when you've got a reason for doing it, when you're doing it for a particular reason, things become easier to do anyway. So with all the heat and everything like that, alhamdulillah, we've had experience of several years of this already. And what's most amazing is that when you're about to start, you think it's going to be very difficult. But Allah facilitates and makes it so easy. Allah would never have obligated us to do this if this was not within the human potential and ability. Because لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah doesn't make anybody liable, responsible and accountable for things that are not within their ability. The fact that it is within our ability, but that's something that you can only understand through experience. When I was in South Africa 2 years ago in Ramadan, where the fast were only 12 hours, personally I enjoyed these fasts more than there, because the day would just finish very quickly. You had more of a night, so that was the only benefit. But the fasts were too small, right? You wake up, you do a few things, and it's Asr prayer, and then it's Maghrib prayer. But one of the things that even some of the scholars were saying there when they heard, because we were finishing Isha and Taraweeh at about half eight, right? Because Taraweeh is starting at 7:10 or something. Sorry, Isha was starting about 7:05, 7:10, and by the time we finished Taraweeh it was about 8:30. And then we do a little bayan, and I would tell them that in London at this point in time we would be doing Asr prayer and doing an Asr bayan. So the ulama were quite surprised, because they would go to sleep at 9 o'clock, 9:30, because they have a full night's sleep, then they wake up at 5 o'clock for suhoor, and then after that you stay awake. So they said, haven't you guys got any discretion, any special compensation that you can lessen the hours? I'm like, why do we even need that? Even our children are keeping fast here, and 8, 7, 8, 9-year-olds are keeping these big fasts. Allah makes it easy. That's the amazing thing. Allah makes it easy. But for each individual, to make it easy, you need to have iman and ihtisab, which means anticipate from Allah whatever you want for that fast. Whether the anticipation is for reward, anticipation is for closeness to Allah, anticipation is for maghfirah and forgiveness. Why am I fasting? What do I want from my fasting? Fasting is this supposedly selfless act that can only be for Allah. That's why many ulama have written that, when you pray, that could be for showing someone else. That I'm only praying because these guys are around, I want to show them that I'm pious or something. When you give zakat or sadaqah, the reason you're spending is to show somebody you're wealthy, or that you're very generous. But when it comes to fasting, you can't have a dual intention there, they're saying. Any dual intention there is insignificant in that sense. Because if I want to tell people I'm fasting, I can be eating as much as possible, hiding, because I'm not in front of everybody all the time. I just tell them I'm fasting. I can just give a straightforward lie. But if I am staying hungry, then that must be for the sake of Allah. That's why one of the only worships where Allah says that fasting is for me and I directly give the reward for it. So the angels are not necessarily consigned to allocate rewards for that. It's Allah Himself, because fasting has to be for me. That's why many ulama have discussed that fasting cannot have any riya and ostentation in it. So we need to really make it for Allah. The base level, it's for Allah. That's why we're doing it. But we want to have iman, and then we want to have as much anticipation of as many things as possible. Ihtisab. I want Allah's forgiveness, I want Allah's rahmah, I want Allah's closeness, I want Allah to raise my status, I want Him to be happy with me, I want Him to bless me. All of these things are ihtisab. The Prophet ﷺ left it general. Ihtisab. Anticipate whatever you want. So when we can do that, if you find you get thirsty, you get tired, you get sleepy, and it's because you're fasting, and the weather in which we're fasting maybe, that's the moment of ihtisab. Think about why you're doing it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves it when people think about Him. That's why the ulama have written, and you get that in some hadith as well, that sometimes a sin takes you closer to Allah than a normal state of complacency. Like if we don't think we're doing anything wrong, then sometimes we think that mashallah we're waliullah or something, and we don't do anything wrong. So we don't actually do anything extra. We just kind of do normal. But when a person falls and makes a sin, commits a sin, then they feel very guilty. And then they do a lot of tawbah. And then that shoots them up. So it's amazing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the system for us that even when you sin by mistake or by accident or by being overwhelmed for whatever reason, there's always a way to come back and to actually come back even better. That's the most amazing thing that I find in the concept of tawbah in Islam. That you could come back better than you were before the sin. Not that you do sins for that reason, because you can exponentially get much further without doing the sin if you just focused. But I'm just saying in our default state when you become complacent. So we want to, again, waste the least amount of time. We want our fast to be as pristine and proper as possible. We want to do enormous amounts of ihtisab during that time. We want to make our dua iftar during iftar beforehand. We want to increase the number of Quran that we do, and we want to also add in certain salat like awwabin. I know after Maghrib that's going to be difficult, but at least when you get up in the morning, whatever time you get up, you can do ishraq prayer, 2, 4, 6, 8 rakats, whatever it may be. The benefit of all of this is that inshaAllah, once we get it wired into our system during Ramadan, it's easier to retain this after Ramadan. So that it's not just for Ramadan that we're changing the schedule and then we get something after Ramadan. Even in Taraweeh, we do 20 rakats. The Prophet ﷺ has a similar narration. Whoever stands during the nights of Ramadan, they also, with iman and ihtisab, then their previous sins are forgiven. So whoever stands, we're going to stand because we're going to do Taraweeh prayer, just like we're going to fast. But if you do it with iman and ihtisab, this anticipation, then even that rockets you further up. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us in this regard. The Ramadan is the month of the Quran, and that's why it's always been from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself used to do an entire revision, a review of the entire Quran that had been revealed up to then. And then in the last year he did it twice with Jibreel alayhi salam. So even from his time, and then you've got the Sahaba who did these long Taraweehs. What is mentioned is that during the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, other times they would do Taraweeh for so long, much longer than our Taraweeh, that people would be, the older people, they would actually have to stand with sticks just to continue to stand. And in fact, the word Taraweeh comes from Tarweeha. It's the plural of Tarweeha. Tarweeha means a rest in between every 4 rakats. And if you look at majority of the books of fiqh, you'll actually find that it says to sit for rest for the amount of time it takes you to perform 4 rakats. So if 4 rakats take 5 to 7 minutes, then to actually sit for 5 to 7 minutes afterwards, then to do the next, then to sit again and then to do the next. We just don't see that today because we don't have time, right? Even in the place where fasting is only 12 hours, like the southern hemisphere, Australia and South Africa, South America, right? At this point in time, or even when it was 12 hours here 15 years ago, right? I don't think anybody did that. But what they used to do in the Haram is that they used to take that time to do tawaf in between. And in Medina Munawwara, there was no tawaf there. So in the Tarweeh, they would actually do some extra nawafil. That's why, according to Imam Malik rahimahullah, one opinion of his is that Taraweeh is the 20 rakats plus the 4 rest times that you get in between. You add another 4 rakats in there. So how much do you get? 6. Exactly. So according to him, one opinion is that Taraweeh is 36 rakats. And that was actually because of the 4 extra in those times that people would just do by themselves, or they sat and did something. That was traditionally the Taraweeh, right, for probably a number of centuries. But today you hardly see that. I don't think even in Saudi, I don't think even in the Haramain they take that long in between them. But that's just to give you an idea of where we were and what has been done before and so on. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to prepare for this month of Ramadan by giving us barakah during this time, to get rid of a lot of things that we need to do before Ramadan so that we can really dedicate ourselves to Ramadan. Of course, there'll be people among us who can't give up the jobs they do, or there's certain tasks, but that's fine. Again, some of the major things in that can be done beforehand, so that you just fulfill whatever has to be done, and then you use the rest of the time. Remember, the way to get barakah in your time is to organize time. Without organizing time, you don't get barakah, because you'll just be, especially when you're tired and hungry, then you may just be taking time to sleep and so on. So have a time to have a nap. Organize the time to have a nap. Fit that into your schedule. But Imam Ghazali rahimahullah mentions it very clearly, that by organizing your time and making sure you stick to your schedule is a method by which blessing in time will manifest itself. And those people who are very organized, they generally tend to be very productive. So we want to be productive people for ourselves and for our hereafter, inshallah, because this world will go very soon. And it's the real life of the hereafter. That is such an important thing for any Muslim, to believe in the afterlife. So regardless of whether we're alive in this world for 5 years, 10 years, 100 years even, the real life is the eternal life, and that's where things are really going to matter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us and assist us in making this life conducive for the afterlife, so that we can actually benefit from this life for the sake of the afterlife, forgive our sins, forgive our mistakes, forgive our excesses, and allow us to be closer to Him, and make this Ramadan a source of proximity to Him that we've never had before. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.